This car is an Austin 7 Meteor. Austin 7 Meteors were originally manufactured here in Australia. The chassis and engine, so the rolling chassis, was shipped out from England, and there was some kind of tax concessions, as I understand it, for cars that had a locally built body. So there were different types of bodies, and the Meteors, Wasps, and there were a number of other types of two-seater sports car bodies that were built and attached to the chassis here in Australia. And this is based on one of those, but it obviously isn't. Those weren't aluminium. This one is made in aluminium. Who made the original cars? There were a number of different manufacturers. They were workshops. They weren't the big end of town. They wasn't Holden or Ford or anything like that. I'll be honest with you, I'm not an expert on how many of these bodies were made and who made them and whatnot, but I do know that there were some made here in Sydney, some made in Melbourne. I'm not sure where else they were made, but Meteors I think were made in Sydney and Melbourne. I'm not sure where the Wasps and some of the other variants were made, but there were lots of them. The main part of the car, my mate John Cooper and I went up to Mount Nathan in southern Queensland to pick it up. We picked it up on a ordinary size car trailer, and you can imagine it looked a bit odd on a ordinary size car trailer. And what we picked up was essentially the chassis, part of an engine, and most of a steel body that was in very poor shape, but resembles the body that we've got on here now. So it included the front cowl, it in fact included the rear and the centre section of the car. There was no bonnet, and this part of the car was missing as well. So all of those were made up from my imagination. So I've no idea what this car did before we picked it up. And I think you'll find that the chassis was from one car, the body was from another car. This has got a different front axle on it now from what it had when we picked it up. It had a straight front axle, now it's got the bowed front axle. So each part of this car probably has a history of its own, so to speak. Anyway, how much of the original car? The chassis is the original chassis and is currently unaltered, although I think it will end up being boxed to strengthen it a little bit. The wooden frame is mostly original, apart from some repairs that we had to do, some slight modifications. That's about it, I think. The front axles and front axles and stub axles are off a later model car, so that the hydraulic brakes would fit on easier. The rear diff will be a later model diff, still out of an Austin 7, as are the front axles, but just a later model Austin 7. This car would have been a 1929 car, but some of the components are off the later models because they're a bit easier to work with and a little bit stronger. I think I'm about 5 years in. I'd say another 2 years to go. All right, so my plan is to use this car. I won't use it as my everyday car, obviously. It wouldn't be very practical. I would like to be able to drive it around town, out into the country, do a few trips in it, not long trips. There's no room for luggage, but I would like to be able to use it quite a bit. I want it to be reliable. I don't care if it's all that fast. It's never going to be as fast as a modern car. If I wanted a fast car, I'd buy a fast modern car. It's all about the experience for me, and the experience in building the car and learning the skills that I needed to be able to do so. My father has been a huge help. He has a history, and I think he passed his car genes on to me. He was a panel beater spray painter in his early days, and he's been a great mentor for me to learn those skills going right back until the time I was 15, 16 when we were working on a Sprite together. I think the thing that has been probably the most difficult was fabricating the rear end of the car. It's quite a lot of work gone into that, and it was a very steep learning curve. Welding the aluminium without distortion or correcting the distortion was a lot of work, and then welding it and grinding it to a point where you can polish it so you can hardly see the joins is is a challenge and a bit time consuming. And I think it tested the patience of my neighbours, because it's a bit noisy panel beating as well. So thanks, neighbours. This was Sterling Moss's private car, but I don't want people to know it's that valuable, John.